Mafia Don stole me from an auction to be his pet. I tamed the beast and made him my most loyal guard dog. The humid air in the auction house hung thick and heavy, laden with the stench of expensive cigar smoke, cheap champagne, and the acrid tang of human desperation. My own skin prickled, a frantic symphony of nerves that every honed instinct screamed to ignore. I stood on the raised platform, a mannequin dressed in silk that clung with deceptive softness, my wrists bound by velvet cords that felt like chains of ice. The light from the single spotlight scalded my bare shoulders, making the shadows beyond the ring impenetrable, concealing the faces of my potential buyers. My breath hitched, a faint tremor rippling through my chest. This was it. The culmination of weeks of calculated entrapment, a deliberate plunge into the viper's nest. I was Isla, an instrument of lethal precision, but in this moment I was merely the product, the prize. My mission? Acquire proximity to Don Nico, the man who held the city in his steel-plated palm. My method. Allow myself to be sold, a chattel amongst other forgotten souls, and then, when his guard was down, strike. The auctioneer's voice boomed, a theatrical purr that scraped across my teeth. Our final, most exquisite lot of the evening, a true masterpiece of defiant beauty, ripe for shaping. He gestured, a florid flourish of his hand, indicating my supposed attributes. I locked my jaw, fighting the primal urge to recoil. Every fiber of my being screamed at the indignity, the dehumanization, but I forced my expression to remain blank, a mask of passive resignation. An assassin never let emotion betray her. The bidding began, a low rumble of escalating numbers. My eyes scanned the blurry outlines of the front row, searching for any tell, any sign of him. Nico was a phantom, a whisper on the wind, intel sketches failing to capture the true essence of his dangerous repute. I needed him to be here to make his move, but not before the right pre-bidder had raised the stakes, driving the price sky high and, more importantly, making my fate truly perilous. A burly man in the second row, his face a mottled landscape of broken capillaries, raised his paddle with a leering grin. Orlov. My stomach curdled. He was exactly who I needed. Known for his particular cruelties, Orlov's acquisition would be a fate worse than death. A personal hell I was prepared to endure only if it meant gaining access to Nico. My intel suggested Nico despised Orlov, considering him a crude brute. If Nico intervened, it would be an act of dominion, not charity. Perfect. The bids climbed, faster now, a frenzied competition for the night's most prized possession. Orlov pushed, his voice a guttural roar, each increase sealing my temporary doom. The auctioneer's excitement was palpable. Going once, going twice. To the esteemed Mr. Orlov. A cold dread seeped into my bones. This was real. The meticulous planning, the mental preparation, none of it fully prepared me for the visceral terror of being claimed by a monster. My hand twitched at my side. Concealed beneath my sleeve, a sliver of polished obsidian rested, its edge honed to a razor's sharpness. A last resort. If Orlov's men reached for me, if I felt the first touch of his ownership, that blade would find my jugular before it found his. I would not be his plaything. My mission was important, but my dignity, my final act of agency, was paramount. Just as the auctioneer's gavel began its descent, a voice cut through the cacophony, low and resonant like a cello's deepest note. It wasn't a shout, but a measured utterance that commanded instant silence. 1,000,000, the number hung in the air, a stark, impossible sum that dwarfed all previous bids. Every head swiveled. My own gaze snapped to the source, narrowing through the blinding spotlight. He stood at the back of the room, leaning against a shadowed pillar, a silhouette carved from midnight. He wasn't participating in the usual frantic scramble of the other bidders. He merely stood utterly still, radiating an aura of cold, undeniable power that silenced even Orlov's bluster. The single word had been an announcement, not an offer. He stepped forward then, out of the deepest shadows, and the room seemed to exhale in collective awe. Tall, impossibly broad in the shoulder, he moved with a predator's grace, his custom-tailored suit a second skin that concealed lethal muscle. His face, when he finally turned it toward the light, was a study in stark, brutal perfection. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jawline shadowed by a hint of stubble, and eyes the color of forged steel, piercing and utterly devoid of warmth. Don Nico. My breath hitched again, but this time it was a different kind of shock. My intel had been paltry. No picture, no description had conveyed the sheer magnetic force of this man. He was a gravitational pull, an event horizon. He didn't just enter a room. He owned it. And now his steel gaze had found me, pinning me to the spot. He didn't look at me like an object, not like the other men. He looked at me like a problem, a challenge, a puzzle he intended to solve. A thrill, icy and unwelcome, skittered down my spine, replacing the fear of Orlov with something far more complex. Orlov, enraged, surged to his feet. What is this? You can't just— Nico didn't even glance at him. His eyes remained fixed on mine, a silent conversation passing between us that only we understood. He saw the flicker of defiance in my gaze, the carefully controlled tremor in my posture. He saw past the silk, past the veneer of submission, to the coiled tension within. And something in his expression shifted, a subtle tightening around his lips, a deepening in those dark, fathomless eyes. He took another step, then another, closing the distance between us. The crowd held its breath. The auctioneer, pale and sweating, stammered, "Don Nico, $1 million?" Nico's lips curved, a faint, almost imperceptible movement that was less a smile and more a tightening of a trap. Did I stutter? His voice was a low growl, laced with a dangerous edge that promised swift retribution for any argument. She is mine. My internal conflict flared. Everything in me, every instinct for self-preservation, screamed at the sudden, absolute nature of his claim. He was a monster, a man built from shadows and ruthlessness. Yet a traitorous part of me, a small, desperate corner of my soul, whispered a faint, almost inaudible thank you for being saved from Orlov's grotesque clutches. I hated it, hated the relief, hated the strange, animalistic curiosity he sparked. My mission was to kill him, not to feel the unsettling pull of his dark magnetism. He reached the edge of the platform, his proximity engulfing me in his scent, expensive cologne, gun oil, and something wild, untamed. He held out a hand to me, not a gesture of aid but of possession. It was a command. My mind raced. This was not the plan. Being plucked from the jaws of one beast, only to be swallowed whole by another, even a more elegant one, presented a new set of variables. I had intended to choose my captor, to maneuver myself into a position of proximity, and then, when the opportunity arose, execute my purpose. Nico's abrupt intervention had shattered my carefully constructed scenario. But this was also my chance. His attention was on me. He had singled me out. I hesitated, a fraction of a second that felt like an eternity. My fingers, still bound, felt the phantom grip of Orlov's rough hands. Nico's hand remained open, waiting. He didn't move it, didn't urge me. He simply existed, a force of nature, patiently expecting obedience. My gaze flickered to his, a silent challenge passing between us. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, as if assessing my defiance. A silent, potent question hung in the air. "Will you fight me, little bird?" And then I made my choice. A defiant choice, yet one that also cemented my trap. I would accept his offer, walk into his gilded cage, and get closer to my target than I ever could have imagined. I raised my bound hands, indicating the cords. His dark gaze dropped to them, then back to my face, a spark of something unreadable in their depths. "Loose her," he commanded, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. A bodyguard, an imposing figure of silent muscle, sprang forward, producing a wicked-looking blade. With a single, swift motion, the velvet cords fell away. Freedom. A fragile, terrifying freedom. My wrists burned, red welts forming where the cords had chafed, but the physical sting was nothing compared to the phantom chains that now bound me to this man. He lowered his hand slightly, a silent invitation. I stepped off the platform, my legs feeling strangely heavy. My bare feet met the cold marble floor. The sensation was immediate grounding. I forced myself to walk with a straight spine, my head held high, meeting his gaze as I approached. When I was within arm's reach, he finally spoke, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur that was meant only for my ears. $1 million for a look like that. He paused, his gaze sweeping over my face, lingering on my lips, then my eyes, dissecting me with an unnerving precision. "Tell me, little one, was it worth it?" The question wasn't about the money. It was about my defiance. It was a test, my breath caught. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the stillness of the room. I could lie, feign gratitude, or melt into the role of a terrified captive. But something in his gaze, that spark of challenge, dared me to be myself. "Worth more to escape what came before?" I replied, my voice a quiet rasp, imbued with a truth I didn't intend to share. My eyes met his, unwavering. I would rather die than be owned by Orlov. The unspoken words hung between us, a raw, undeniable confession of agency. A flicker, a ghost of an expression crossed his face. Not quite a smile, but a softening around the edges of his mouth that made him look even more dangerous, even more intriguing. Indeed. He reached out, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of my wrist, tracing the red mark left by the cords. It was a feather-light touch, yet it sent a jolt of heat through me, a disorienting sensation that both repelled and captivated. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He simply registered it, his touch a silent acknowledgement of the pain, a possessive claim. From now on, he murmured, his thumb stroking my pulse point, the rhythmic beat mirroring the frantic pounding in my chest. Nothing will touch you that I do not allow. The words were a promise, a decree and a subtle threat, all woven into one. They were meant to reassure, to claim, to control. And they sparked a new, unsettling fire within me. He saw my defiance, my fight. He hadn't bought a broken doll. He had bought a wild animal. And he wanted to be the one to tame it. He released my wrist, the sudden absence of his touch leaving a lingering phantom heat. Then, without another word, he turned, his body a solid wall, offering no explanation to the now murmuring crowd, no dismissal of Orlov's sputtering rage. "We're leaving," he stated, his voice ringing with absolute authority. His men, a phalanx of shadows, materialized around us, creating an impenetrable barrier. I was swept into their midst, a prisoner of a different kind, now under his absolute protection. The auction house faded behind me, its oppressive atmosphere replaced by the chill of the night air. I was in his car, a luxurious armored sedan, before I fully registered the transition. The leather seats were cool beneath my bare legs. Nico sat beside me, silent, radiating an intensity that stole the oxygen from the air. The city lights streamed past the tinted windows, a blur of neon and concrete. I was safe from Orlov, safe from the immediate threat of unspeakable horrors. But as I glanced at the man beside me, his profile carved from obsidian in the shifting streetlights, a new terror bloomed in my chest, cold and profound. I was no longer a free agent, a phantom assassin. I was his. And my mission, once so clear, was now irrevocably entangled with the dangerous, possessive will of Don Nico. He had bought me, not just my body, but my presence in his world. My mark was now my keeper. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that escaping his gilded cage would be far more perilous than any assignment I had ever undertaken. My mark was now my keeper. The realization settled in my gut like a stone, heavy and cold, a truth that stripped away the last vestiges of my calculated control. The armored sedan glided through the city, its progress silent, cushioned, and utterly inevitable. Nico remained beside me, a dark, immovable silhouette against the shifting canvas of streetlights. His presence radiated a potent authority that consumed the limited space, leaving me feeling small, exposed. A strange current hummed between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of the transaction that had just taken place. He owned me now, in every sense that mattered in his world. Yet, the memory of his steel gaze, the one that had cut through my facade and seen the flicker of defiance, resonated with a disturbing clarity. He hadn't bought a docile pet. He had purchased a challenge. My eyes swept over his profile, sharp and austere. The scent of him, that expensive blend of sandalwood and something sharper, metallic, was a potent intoxicant, clinging to my clothes, invading my senses. It was a dangerous scent, a predator's signature. My mission, once a pristine, laser-focused objective, now felt muddied, compromised by this unsettling proximity, this unforeseen shift in dynamics. Every rational thought urged me to recoil, to remember my purpose. But a treacherous fascination stirred beneath the surface, a dark curiosity that burned through my veins. The car slowed, then swerved, turning off a main thoroughfare into a secluded, tree-lined drive. A wrought iron gate, towering and intricately forged, slid open with a whisper of hydraulics, revealing a vast, sprawling estate. The mansion beyond was a masterpiece of old-world grandeur, its stone facade glowing softly under discreet uplighting, every window a warm, inviting square of amber. Inviting, yet I felt no invitation, only the familiar dread of being drawn deeper into a web. We pulled up to the main entrance, where two hulking men in dark suits stood like statues. The car door opened, and one of them offered a hand, not to me, but to Nico. He exited first, his movements fluid and precise, a testament to contained power. I followed, a beat behind, feeling the crunch of gravel under my bare feet, a sharp contrast to the plush interior of the car. The night air was cooler here, tinged with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, a stark difference from the stale air of the auction house. Nico didn't wait, didn't offer a hand. He simply moved, expecting me to follow. And I did, walking on numb legs, my spine straight, my head high, an echo of the defiance I had shown on the platform. My peripheral vision caught the silent scrutiny of his guards, their gazes assessing, cataloging. I was a new variable in their carefully constructed world, a potential weakness, or perhaps a dangerous prize. The grand doors swung open silently, revealing an entrance hall that dwarfed anything I had ever seen. Marble gleamed under the soft glow of a massive crystal chandelier. A sweeping staircase, its banister a dark polished wood, curved gracefully upwards, disappearing into shadows. The air inside was hushed, reverent, imbued with the scent of old money and power. A woman, slender and severe, her dark hair pulled back in a tight chignon, approached Nico. "Don Nico," she said, her voice low and deferential. Her eyes, cool and assessing, flicked to me, lingering for a fraction of a second too long before returning to him. "Everything is prepared." "Good, Elena," Nico replied, his voice a quiet rumble that filled the vast space without effort. He didn't elaborate, didn't introduce me. His gaze returned to me, a silent command. "Follow me." He led me across the polished marble, his strides long and unhurried. My bare feet felt the chill of the stone, each step a further step into this new, gilded prison. We ascended the grand staircase, its intricate carvings a blur. My eyes darted, assessing, analyzing, searching for any detail that could become an advantage. A hidden alcove, a loose panel, a subtle shift in airflow. My assassin's instincts, finely honed over years, refused to be silenced, even here. He stopped at a heavy, ornate door on the second floor. Elena, who had followed a respectful distance behind, produced a key, her movements practiced. The lock clicked, a soft final sound. Nico pushed the door open, gesturing me inside with a slight inclination of his head. The room was breathtaking, a symphony of luxurious fabrics and antique furniture. A massive four-poster bed draped in silk dominated the space. A private sitting area beckoned with plush velvet sofas and a roaring fireplace. French doors opened onto a private balcony, revealing a panoramic view of manicured gardens stretching into the moonlit distance. A masterpiece. A gilded cage, indeed. My gaze immediately snapped to the balcony doors. My heart hammered, a frantic thrum against my ribs. Could I jump? Could I scale the wall? My mind raced, calculating distances, evaluating risks. Admiring the view, little one? Nico's voice, a low current behind me, shattered my tactical reverie. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. His eyes held that same unreadable depth, that unsettling knowing. "It's comprehensive," I replied, choosing my words with care. The subtext, I see the cage, not just the gilded bars. A corner of his mouth tilted, a ghost of a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Every comfort, every luxury," he murmured, his gaze sweeping over the room, then returning to me, a proprietary gleam in their depths. No need to look for alternatives. My jaw tightened. He knew, he always knew. My internal battlefield flared. Get out, find a weakness. Complete the mission. But another part, that traitorous whisper, noted the silk sheets, the soft rugs, the fireplace crackling with warmth, a stark contrast to the cold cells and desolate safe houses that had been my norm. "A bath has been drawn," Elena interjected, her voice flat, emotionless. She gestured to an adjoining door. "Your clothes are laid out. A meal will be brought shortly." "Excellent," Nico said, a brief nod dismissing her. Elena melted away, leaving us alone in the cavernous room. He walked past me toward the fireplace, his movements slow, deliberate. He picked up a poker, stirring the embers, the clink of metal against stone echoing in the silence. The firelight danced across his stark features, deepening the shadows. He was a creature of darkness, made more dangerous by the veneer of civilization. "You look tired," he observed, not turning, his voice surprisingly gentle. "And your wrists, they still bear the marks of your ordeal." My gaze dropped to my bare wrists, the red welts a stark contrast against my pale skin. The memory of his fingers tracing my pulse returned, that strange jolt of heat. My mission was to kill him, yet here he was, acknowledging my pain with an unnerving intimacy. "I heal quickly," I replied, my voice cool, detached. I hated the vulnerability his observation implied. He finally turned, leaning against the mantelpiece, his arms crossed over his broad chest. I have no doubt you do. His eyes, dark as midnight, held mine. But you will not need to here. My home is a sanctuary. For those I deem worthy. The word worthy hung in the air, a silken thread of menace. Worthy of his protection, worthy of his gilded cage. Worthy of existing in his orbit? And what determines worthiness, Don Nico? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. A dare. His gaze intensified, a flicker of something raw and untamed in their depths. Loyalty, obedience, and a certain fire. His eyes dropped to my lips, lingered, then returned to my eyes, holding me captive. A fire I saw tonight, even under those velvet cords. My breath hitched. He saw me. He didn't just see an object. He saw me. The professional assassin, the instrument of death, was momentarily disarmed by the penetrating truth of his assessment. It was infuriating and disturbingly exhilarating. The moment was shattered by the sharp, insistent ring of a phone. Nico reached into his inner jacket pocket, extracting a sleek black device. He glanced at the screen, a muscle tightening in his jaw. Yes? He answered, his voice devoid of warmth, suddenly a cold blade. He turned away from me, walking toward the French doors, stepping out onto the balcony. The doors remained slightly ajar, allowing his voice, now sharp and ruthless, to filter back into the room. You have him? A pause. Excellent. The warehouse on the river? No, not a public statement. No one needs to know. Another pause. Make it an example. Let his accomplices understand the cost of betrayal. Let them think about their families, about their own pitiful lives, before they entertain such foolish notions again. My blood ran cold. The callousness, the surgical precision of his words was terrifying. He was orchestrating a death, perhaps multiple deaths, without a hint of remorse, without a tremor in his voice. This was the man I was sent to kill, the monster I had mentally prepared myself for. And Orlov? He continued, his voice dropping to a lower, more dangerous register. Send him a message, a clear one. Let him understand that what is mine stays mine. And if he ever looks in my direction again, he will lose more than just a bidding war. He ended the call, his movements deliberate, controlled. He remained on the balcony for a moment, his back to me, framed by the moonlit gardens, a dark king surveying his domain. Then he re-entered the room, his expression once again unreadable. The air in the room felt thick, charged with the aftershocks of his ruthlessness. He met my gaze. A necessary unpleasantness, he stated, his eyes boring into mine, as if daring me to judge him. Loose ends. Untamed ambition. My heart hammered, but my assassin's mind, the one that appreciated lethal efficiency, acknowledged the chilling logic. You deal with your enemies swiftly. I deal with them absolutely, he corrected, his voice a low growl. And those who are under my protection, well, they need never fear such swiftness. Only my enemies do. He took a step toward me, then another, closing the distance, his presence eclipsing the room. You are under my protection now, Isla, and you will remain so long as you understand what that entails. He reached me, his hand coming up to cup my jaw. His thumb stroked my cheek, a feather-light touch that still felt like a brand. His eyes, dark and fathomless, searched mine. It means you are safe here with me, nowhere else. The words were possessive, chilling, yet a traitorous part of me, weary from a lifetime of fending for myself, felt a flicker of something akin to relief. The sheer, overwhelming power of his claim, while terrifying, was also a formidable shield. It also means, he continued, his voice dropping, you belong to me. Your safety is inextricably linked to your captivity. Do you understand? My tongue felt thick. I understand, I whispered, the lie tasting like ash. I understand I am trapped. I understand I am a target. I understand I must kill you. His lips curved into that subtle, unsettling smile again. Good. He released my face, the sudden absence of his touch leaving a cold spot on my skin. Now refresh yourself. I will expect you for dinner. He turned, walking toward the door, leaving me alone in the luxurious prison. The heavy door clicked shut behind him. I rushed to it, twisting the handle. Locked. Of course. I spun, my gaze sweeping the opulent room, every detail now feeling like a trap. The French doors leading to the balcony beckoned. My active choice, my defiant choice, was to test the boundaries. I strode to them, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm. I gripped the elegant brass handles, pushing, locked. My jaw tightened. I tested the windows, the heavy frames unyielding. I ran my hands along the walls, searching for any give, any hidden panel. Nothing. This room, designed for ultimate comfort, was also designed for absolute containment, frustration, cold and sharp, pierced through my careful composure. He hadn't just bought a pretty face. He had bought a prisoner he intended to keep. I moved to the master bed, pulling back the silk sheets, running my hands over the mattress, searching. Nothing. No hidden weapons, no escape routes. A sudden, sharp hunger pang reminded me of Elena's promise. A meal would be brought. Perhaps that was my opportunity. My mind, ever analytical, began to construct a new strategy. I found the bathroom, a lavish sanctuary of marble and gold. The drawn bath, steaming gently, released the soothing scent of lavender. I stripped off the ruined silk dress, letting it fall to the floor in a heap. My muscles ached, my skin felt bruised by the weight of the night's events. As I stepped into the hot water, the relief was immediate, a luxurious warmth that eased the tension in my limbs. I closed my eyes, letting the heat seep into my bones, a brief reprieve from the escalating chaos within my mind. But as I reached for the scented soap, my fingers brushed against something cold and smooth near the edge of the tub. I opened my eyes, my gaze dropping to the offending object. It was a small, ornate box, crafted from polished wood, nestled discreetly against the pristine tile. A shiver traced its way down my spine. My assassin's instinct screamed at the unexpected presence. My heart began to pound anew, a frantic drum in my chest. I hesitated, then reached for it, my fingers trembling slightly. The box was heavier than it looked. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, lay a delicate silver cuff. Not a bracelet, but a single, exquisitely crafted anklet, its surface gleaming with an intricate, almost invisible engraving. My gaze narrowed, my breath catching in my throat as I finally deciphered the minuscule script etched into the silver, "Property of Don Nico, do not remove." Beneath the anklet, a smaller, darker item lay. I lifted it out, my fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface of a tiny, polished stone. A miniature, perfectly formed GPS tracker. My breath hitched. He wasn't just locking doors. He wasn't just securing windows. He intended to know my exact location, every moment of every day. This wasn't a gilded cage. It was a leash. And the true extent of my captivity had just been revealed. The anklet, gleaming silver against the dark velvet, felt like a branding iron held to my soul. A collar. A meticulously crafted cage that extended beyond the thick walls of this luxurious prison. My breath caught, not in fear, but in a surge of icy fury. He didn't just want to control me. He wanted to track me, to know my every move, every shift of my weight. The GPS tracker, a tinny, polished bead nestled next to the engraved cuff, was the final, undeniable proof. My initial instinct was visceral. Crush it, shatter it, throw it against the marble wall, and watch it splinter into a million pieces. But the assassin in me, the part that valued cold calculation above all else, intervened. Rage was a luxury I couldn't afford. Defiance, yes, but tempered with strategy. To destroy it would be to announce my intentions, to raise his guard before I had even begun to probe his weaknesses. This was not a test of my obedience. It was a test of my patience, my cunning. I lifted the cuff, its weight surprisingly light, a deceptive elegance. "Property of Don Nico, do not remove." The words burned, a silent scream of indignity. My fingers, still raw from the velvet cords, trembled as I slid the anklet around my left ankle. It clicked into place with a faint, chilling sound, a whisper of finality. A thin band of silver, yet it felt heavier than any shackles I'd ever imagined. I might wear his mark, but it would not define me. It would be my disguise, a visible symbol of my false compliance. The bathwater had grown cool, the lavender scent now faded, a distant memory of promised comfort. I climbed out, wrapping a thick plush towel around myself, its softness a jarring contrast to the harsh reality of my situation. I moved to the adjoining dressing room Elena had indicated earlier. Clothes lay neatly folded on a chaise lounge, a silk chemise, an exquisitely tailored dress of midnight blue, and a pair of delicate, strappy heels. My reflection in the full-length mirror was a stranger, a woman draped in luxury, her face a mask of serene composure, her ankle branded. I dressed slowly, each garment a new layer of my assumed identity. The silk of the dress whispered against my skin, a second skin of deception. It clung to my curves, highlighting a femininity I usually downplayed, a deliberate choice to lean into the role he expected. As I fastened the last clasp, my gaze returned to my left ankle. The silver gleamed, a stark reminder. He thinks he owns me. The thought ignited a colder, more dangerous resolve. He had merely bought himself a closer, more personal executioner. My mission was still paramount. Now, however, it carried a new, intensely personal flavor. A soft knock sounded at the door, followed by a low, male voice. "Dinner, miss!" "Don Nico is waiting." My heart gave a solitary thud. Showtime. I smoothed the silk over my hips, took a deep, fortifying breath, and walked toward the door. It wasn't Elena who waited, but two of Nico's imposing guards, their faces devoid of expression. They didn't speak, simply turned, leading me through the dimly lit corridor. The silence was thick, punctuated only by the soft brush of my dress against my legs. They led me down the grand staircase into a dining room I hadn't seen before. It was a study in understated power. A long mahogany table, polished to a mirror sheen, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. A single place setting, impeccably arranged, awaited me at one end. Nico sat at the head of the table, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of a massive, unlit fireplace. His eyes in the low light of the room were like chips of coal. He watched me approach, his gaze unwavering, dissecting. I walked with my chin subtly elevated, my bare ankle with its silver adornment, visible with every step. I made no attempt to conceal it. This was my quiet rebellion. I would wear his mark, but I would not cower beneath it. His lips twitched, a minuscule movement that could have been approval, or a silent acknowledgement of my defiance. "Sit," he commanded, his voice a low rumble. I did, gracefully pulling out the heavy chair myself, meeting his gaze as I settled into the plush leather. The space between us, the length of the dark table, felt less like a dining arrangement and more like a battlefield. A server, silent as a ghost, appeared from the shadows, placing a crystal glass of water before me. The scent of roasted meat and herbs wafted from a covered silver platter. "You're punctual," Nico observed, his voice holding a hint of dry amusement. "A rare quality." "Punctuality is a virtue," I replied, my voice cool, even betraying nothing. I picked up my fork, my gaze casually sweeping the room. No other guards were visible, but I knew they were there, unseen, unheard, a pervasive presence just beyond the heavy velvet curtains, behind the closed doors. Every instinct screamed at me to be alert, to find the blind spots, the weaknesses. "Indeed," he mused, leaning back in his chair, his dark eyes never leaving me. He made no move to eat, content merely to watch. "Did you find your accommodations to your liking, little one?" "They were extravagant," I conceded, my words laced with a subtle sarcasm that only he would catch. I met his gaze, my chin angled slightly. "A gilded cage, Don Nico, is still a cage." His gaze sharpened, a spark of something almost like admiration igniting in their depths. "Honesty," he murmured, "another rare quality, and a dangerous one, in my world." He paused, his gaze dropping to my left ankle, lingering on the silver cuff. "Did you understand its purpose?" My pulse gave a traitorous leap, but my expression remained serene. "I did. A means of ensuring loyalty. I left the rest unsaid, and tracking your property. And do you accept it?" The question hung in the air, a loaded missile. "I wear it," I said, a subtle emphasis on the action rather than the sentiment. "My choices here are limited." A low chuckle, a rich, dark sound escaped his lips. "Limited, perhaps, but not entirely absent. You had a choice not to wear it. You chose to comply. That shows a certain understanding of your position." "Or a certain pragmatism," I countered, my eyes unwavering. "You think this means submission? You are sorely mistaken." His smile deepened, a genuinely unsettling sight. "Pragmatism," he repeated, savoring the word. "I like that. Perhaps you are more than just a pretty face, after all." The insult, cloaked as a compliment, pricked at my pride. I ignored it, focusing instead on the subtle shift in his eyes, the almost imperceptible tensing of his jawline. He was intrigued. That was a start. As the server brought the platters, I inhaled deeply, taking in the rich aroma of the food. My stomach gave a faint rumble, a surprising acknowledgement of hunger. I ate slowly, deliberately, my senses heightened. The subtle click of a distant lock, the faint whisper of air from a hidden vent, the shifting weight of the guards outside, my mind processed every detail, building a mental map of my surroundings, cataloging every potential threat, every possible exit. "You're very observant," Nico stated, interrupting my silent audit. He had finally begun to eat, his movements precise, almost economical. I met his gaze, a subtle challenge in my eyes. "It's a habit. A useful one." He He sliced a piece of rare beef, his knife a glint of silver. "Tell me, what do you observe about my sanctuary?" This was it. My chance to shift the power dynamic, to gain his respect not as a pet but as a professional. I swallowed, meeting his gaze with unblinking intensity. "Your security is extensive," I began, my voice quiet, analytical, but not infallible. A flicker of surprise quickly crossed his face. He paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Elaborate." "The guard outside the main door," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "His weight shifts predominantly to his left foot. A sign of impatience, perhaps, but also a tell. And the airflow from the north corridor, it's uneven, suggesting a structural anomaly, or perhaps a recent alteration to a wall or floor panel. And the faint scent of copper in the west wing, barely perceptible but present." His fork clattered against his plate. His eyes, usually so cold and unreadable, now held a raw, intense curiosity. "Copper?" he asked, his voice low, sharp. "What would that indicate?" "If it's not from the plumbing," I mused, deliberately drawing out the suspense, "it could be a residue. From certain types of wiring. Or perhaps from fresh blood recently cleaned." Silence descended, heavy and charged. His gaze pierced me, seeking to unravel the truth behind my words. He hadn't expected this. He had expected docile compliance, maybe even a desperate plea. He hadn't expected a tactical assessment. "You have a keen eye, little one," he said, his voice laced with a new, dangerous respect. Or perhaps a keen understanding of such things. "Experience is a harsh teacher," I replied, a subtle acknowledgement of my true nature. "I know what I'm talking about, Don Nico. You just don't know why." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his gaze never leaving mine. "And what else does your experience tell you about my home tonight?" I hesitated, allowing the silence to stretch, to amplify the tension. This was a gamble. I could hold back, or I could stake my claim. Your external perimeter, specifically the wooded area to the east, is less secure than the rest of the grounds. The infrared sensors show a slight, almost imperceptible interference. Too regular for wildlife, too inconsistent for a technical glitch. His eyes narrowed. A muscle jumped in his jaw. The shift in his demeanor was immediate, palpable. The casual observer was gone, replaced by the calculating Don. "You've been studying my security?" "I observe my surroundings," I corrected. "Especially when my survival depends on it. And a security flaw, no matter how small, affects everyone within the walls." I met his gaze, a flicker of genuine concern now mixed with my defiance. "Including you." Just as the words left my lips, a deafening explosion ripped through the air, shaking the very foundations of the mansion. The crystal chandelier above us swayed violently, shedding shards of light like falling stars. The plate before me jumped, scattering food. Nico was on his feet in an instant, a blur of motion. His hand went to his inner jacket, drawing a heavy black pistol with practiced ease. His face, usually a mask of control, was momentarily stripped bare. A flash of raw, visceral rage, quickly followed by a cold, deadly determination, crossed his features. It was a glimpse, brief and terrifying, of the beast within, of the man who ruled through fear and absolute power. And for that fleeting second, he looked utterly human, utterly vulnerable. "Get down," he roared, his voice cutting through the ringing in my ears. He didn't order me away. He ordered me to safety, his body implicitly shielding me even as he scanned the room for the source of the attack. Before I could fully react, the dining room doors burst open, revealing not his guards but a team of masked men, clad in tactical gear, their weapons raised. They were professionals moving with brutal efficiency. "Consigliere." One of Nico's actual guards, now rushing in from a different entrance, screamed, his voice thick with betrayal. "It's Santino! Santino!" Nico's second in command. The betrayal was complete. Nico didn't hesitate. He opened fire, his shots precise, deadly. Two of the masked assailants dropped before they could even react. But there were too many. A volley of return fire erupted, bullets ricocheting off the marble columns. Tearing into the silk curtains, I dropped to the floor, instinctively rolling behind the heavy mahogany table, its solid bulk offering scant protection. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. My hand searched for a weapon, anything, my fingers brushing against nothing but polished wood. Nico was a whirlwind of controlled violence, moving with an agility that belied his size. He ducked, weaved, returned fire, taking cover behind a thick pillar, never exposing himself for long. He was good, extremely good, but he was outmanned, outgunned, the East Wing. I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos, remembering my earlier observation. Through the gardens! They'll flank you from there. He glanced at me, a quick, sharp look of acknowledgement, before turning his attention back to the fight. He saw the truth in my words, the professional assessment in the middle of a war zone. It was an unspoken alliance, forged in the crucible of immediate danger. One of the masked men, larger than the others, broke away, heading directly for the elegant double doors leading to the parlor, clearly a diversion or an attempt to cut off a retreat. Another, seeing me hunched behind the table, shifted his aim, a cold glint in his eyes. "Nico!" I yelled, my voice raw. "Behind you." "The door!" He spun, firing. The masked man crumpled, a geyser of blood blooming on his chest. But the momentary distraction cost him. A bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing through the fine fabric of his suit. He grunted, a flicker of pain crossing his face, but he didn't fall, didn't falter. He simply pressed a hand to the wound, his gaze hardening. "Isla, through the service entrance!" He barked, his voice tight, strained. "Now!" He was covering my retreat, putting himself between me and the encroaching enemy. The absolute, undeniable possessiveness of his protection, even in the heart of a firefight, was a jarring revelation. But the service entrance was on the opposite side of the room, through a gauntlet of armed men. I couldn't make it. Not without a diversion. My eyes darted around, searching, assessing. My gaze landed on the remaining silver platter, its contents now scattered. Beneath it, the ornate silver lid. Heavy, solid. A weapon, ignoring his command, driven by pure instinct and a desperate need to survive, and to keep him alive, even if it meant risking my own life for my mark. I lunged, snatching the heavy lid. A masked man was advancing on Nico, his weapon aimed at his head. "Duck!" I screamed. Nico reacted instantly, dropping to one knee. In the same movement, I launched the silver lid with all my strength. It spun through the air, a metallic disc, striking the advancing assailant squarely in the face. He reeled, disoriented, his aim going wide. Nico took advantage, firing 2 swift shots. The man dropped, but my diversion had exposed me. I was no longer hidden by the table. A chilling click echoed through the room as a masked figure who had been systematically eliminating the remaining loyal guards near the entrance turned. His weapon, a silenced pistol, was now aimed squarely at my chest. A searing heat erupted in my side as I twisted, a sharp, white-hot pain blooming. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, sending me sprawling across the polished marble. My head hit the cold stone with a sickening thud. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of shattered crystal and muted gunfire. My vision blurred. The masked figure towering over me, a dark, ominous silhouette against the dancing flames from a new distant explosion. He raised his arm, his pistol rock steady, preparing for the finishing shot. My body screamed in protest, but I couldn't move. My head swam. He had me. And my mission, my life, was about to end here, on the cold floor of Don Nico's treacherous dining room. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of shattered crystal and muted gunfire. He had me, and my mission, my life, was about to end here, on the cold floor of Don Nico's treacherous dining room. The masked figure loomed, a dark, menacing silhouette, his silenced pistol a bleak final promise. My body screamed in protest, a chorus of agony and helplessness, but I couldn't move. My head swam, the sharp tang of copper and dust filling my nostrils. This was it. The grand plan, the intricate dance of deception, ending in a brutal, inglorious sprawl on polished stone. A primal scream tore through the chaos, not from me, but from Nico. It was a sound stripped of civilization, a guttural roar of pure, unadulterated fury that vibrated through the marble floor and into my bruised bones. The masked man flinched, his weapon wavering a fraction of an inch, his attention momentarily diverted by the sheer, terrifying force of Nico's rage. That sliver of a second was all I needed. My gaze, honed by years of instinct, darted to my right. A shattered champagne flute, its stem a wicked point, lay within reach. Every nerve screamed at the effort, but I twisted, a grunt of pain escaping my lips. My trembling fingers closed around the jagged glass, its edge biting into my palm, a new pain eclipsing the searing agony in my side. Just as the masked man realigned his aim, his eyes locking onto mine with chilling intent, I thrust the broken stem upward, a desperate final act. It wasn't a clean strike, but it connected, burying itself into the soft, unprotected skin beneath his jawline. He gasped, a wet, choking sound, his eyes widening in shock behind the dark slits of his mask. Blood, hot and metallic, welled up, coating my hand, his weapon dropping with a dull clatter. He stumbled back, clutching his throat, his dark gaze still fixed on me in disbelief before he collapsed, a heavy sack of limbs at my feet. The dining room erupted anew, a furious crescendo of gunfire. Nico, freed from his immediate engagement, saw my desperate act, his eyes burning with an inferno of protectiveness. He moved like a shadow, a blur of tailored suit and deadly grace, eliminating the remaining attackers with ruthless efficiency. His shots were precise, brutal, each one a testament to his lethal prowess. He was a force of nature, a vengeful god, and in that moment, I understood the true extent of his power. Both terrifying and utterly captivating. The last assailant crumpled, a strangled cry dying in his throat. Silence descended, heavy and absolute, broken only by the crackle of distant flames and the ragged gasp of my own breath. The air hung thick with the stench of gunpowder, blood, and the metallic tang of fear. Nico was beside me in an instant, dropping to his knees, his pistol still clutched in his hand. His steel-gray eyes, usually so guarded, were alight with a terrifying intensity. A raw, primal concern that stripped away every layer of his composure. He didn't touch me, but his gaze swept over my body, searching, assessing the damage. His eyes snagged on my side, where the silk dress was now soaked crimson, then on my bloodied hand, still clutching the shard of glass. "Isla!" he rasped, his voice raw, laced with an emotion I couldn't name. "Are you hit?" I tried to speak, but a cough tore through my chest, rattling my ribs. "Yes," I managed, the word a weak whisper. The pain, once a dull ache, sharpened, radiating through my body. He dropped his pistol, the heavy thud echoing in the stillness. His hands, usually so dominant, were surprisingly gentle as they peeled back the silk, revealing the jagged tear in my skin, the blood blossoming rapidly. A muscle worked in his jaw. His face was a mask of grim determination. "The bastards," he growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that promised agonizing retribution. He tore a strip of fabric from one of the silk curtains, pressing it firmly against my wound. The pressure was excruciating, a gasp tearing from my throat. "Hold this. Don't move." He rose, his gaze sweeping the carnage, his eyes settling on the crumpled figure of Santino, who lay amidst his fallen men, his face contorted in a final defiant sneer. Nico's lips thinned. "Santino," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You truly underestimated me." He walked toward his traitorous consigliere, his movements slow, deliberate, each step a prelude to judgment. Santino, though wounded and bleeding profusely, lifted his head, a defiant glint in his eyes. "You'll never know true loyalty, Nico. You breed only fear." Nico merely looked at him, his gaze like twin daggers. "Fear is a powerful motivator, Santino. But tonight it wasn't fear that saved me. It was loyalty." His gaze flickered back to me, still pressing the makeshift bandage to my side. "A loyalty you never understood." He drew a small gleaming dagger from his boot, its blade catching the dim light. There was no theatrical flourish, no wasted motion. It was a cold, efficient act. A choked cry, then silence. The air thrummed with the finality of it. This was the monster, the man capable of ruthless, absolute control. And he had just exerted that control. For me. He returned, his face a hard mask, the lingering rage still simmering beneath the surface. He knelt beside me again, his large hands carefully, competently, checking my pulse, assessing my pallor. "You saved my life, Isla," he murmured, his gaze intense, piercing. "Twice tonight." My breath hitched. The words, so simple, carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. My mission, my deception, my true identity, all of it now exposed by a shared moment of survival. "You were distracted," I replied, my voice weak, my head swimming. The irony of my response, a half-truth that acknowledged his formidable skill, was not lost on me. He gave a harsh, mirthless laugh. "Distracted by your reckless defiance, and your stubborn refusal to be a victim." His eyes softened imperceptibly, a fleeting glimpse of vulnerability. "You risked everything. For a man you were sent to kill." My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. He knew. My carefully constructed facade shattered. My intel was incomplete, I admitted, the lie tasting like ash. "You were more complicated than expected." He leaned closer, his scent of expensive cologne, gun oil, and now, raw adrenaline, filling my senses. "And you, little one, were more than just a pet. You were a blade, a very sharp one." His thumb gently wiped a smear of blood from my cheek. "An assassin." It wasn't a question, but a statement of absolute certainty. My gaze met his, unwavering despite the pain. Yes. He stared at me, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to decipher the deepest secrets of my soul. And your mission? To kill you, I whispered, the confession a bitter taste on my tongue. To get close, and then to strike. The cold, hard truth laid bare. A corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, but a slow, almost appreciative curve. And you chose to save me instead. His voice dropped, becoming a low, intimate murmur, meant only for my ears. Why? The question hung between us, heavy with unspoken implications. My internal battlefield raged. He is your mark. He is your enemy. He is a monster. But the memory of his furious roar, his protective stance, his gentle touch warred with my training. Because, I whispered, the words surprising even me with their raw honesty. I couldn't let him have you. Not like that. It wasn't about love, not yet. It was about something far more dangerous, far more possessive. It was about agency, about choosing. His eyes flared, a dark, primal possessiveness igniting in their depths. Mine, he breathed. The word a vow, a decree, a promise. He reached out, his hand gently cupping the back of my head, pulling me closer. His lips, warm and demanding, descended upon mine, stealing my breath, erasing the pain, erasing the chaos. The kiss was raw, desperate, imbued with the adrenaline of battle and the intensity of a near-death escape. It was a collision of two worlds, two predators, a merging of lethal wills. His tongue swept into my mouth, claiming, consuming, igniting a fire that spread through my veins, chasing away the cold dread. I responded with equal ferocity, a lifetime of suppressed emotion erupting, a dangerous, thrilling surrender to the man who had just saved my life, and whose life I had just saved in turn. My hands still sticky with blood clutched at his expensive suit, pulling him closer, needing his solidity, his dangerous strength. When he finally broke the kiss, we were both breathless, our chests heaving. His gaze, dark and smoldering, burned into mine. You're bleeding, he murmured, his thumb brushing my lips, smearing a trace of my blood. I need to get you upstairs. He scooped me into his arms, his strength effortless, his movements careful despite the urgent situation. I clung to him, my head resting against his shoulder, inhaling his unique scent. The world tilted, but in his arms, I felt strangely secure, wrapped in a dangerous, undeniable protection. We ascended the grand staircase, its marble now streaked with dirt and debris, a stark contrast to its earlier pristine state. His men, a phalanx of shadows, had begun to secure the mansion, their faces grim, efficient. They offered Nico brief, respectful nods as we passed, their eyes flicking to me, acknowledging the new dynamic, the woman in his arms who had fought alongside him. He carried me into the lavish room, the one he had earlier called my gilded cage. The fire still crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows. He laid me gently on the massive bed, the silk sheets a soft cradle against my aching body. Stay still, he commanded, his voice tight with concern, a stark contrast to his earlier ruthlessness. He began to strip off his jacket, his tie, revealing the muscular breadth of his chest, the wound on his shoulder a dark stain against the pristine white of his shirt. He was a beautiful, dangerous creature, and the vulnerability he showed in this moment, for me, was intoxicating. He retrieved a first aid kit from a hidden compartment, his movements precise, professional. He worked quickly, efficiently, cleaning my wound, his touch firm but gentle. Each touch sent a jolt through me, a mixture of pain and perverse pleasure. His dark gaze was focused, intense, on my skin, his face close enough that I felt the warmth of his breath. You're lucky, he murmured, his voice low as he applied a clean dressing. It's deep, but it missed anything vital. Luck is for amateurs, I replied, a faint tremor in my voice. Skill and a little bit of desperation? He chuckled, a rich, dark sound. Indeed. He finished with my side, then turned his attention to my hand, where the champagne flute had left a nasty gash. He cleaned it with the same meticulous care, his fingers brushing mine, sending sparks of heat through my veins. When he was done, he sat back on his heels, his gaze fixed on mine. The raw intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming. You are an assassin, he stated again, not a question. A professional killer. Your job was to end my life. And your job was to kill Orloff and Santino and half a dozen others, I retorted, my voice regaining some of its strength. We are not so different. A genuine smile, slow and dangerous, spread across his face, transforming his features, making him breathtakingly handsome. No, he agreed, we are not. We are precisely the same, little blade. Two sides of a very sharp coin. He reached out, his hand tracing the line of my jaw, his thumb brushing my lower lip. But you chose to use your skill for me. You put your life on the line. For me, my heart hammered. His touch was a brand, possessive, claiming. I chose to save you, I corrected, a subtle pushback against his absolute claim, even as I leaned into his touch. It was my choice. His smile deepened. And that, Isla, makes it all the more interesting. He leaned closer, his lips brushing mine, and all the more mine. He kissed me again, a soft, lingering touch that promised far more than it delivered. He pulled back, his eyes still burning with that potent intensity. You cannot stay here as my pet, he stated, his voice now serious, devoid of any playful menace. Not anymore. Not after tonight. My world is too dangerous for a woman I cannot fully trust, and too important for a woman I could ever allow to be simply a captive. My breath hitched. My internal war raged. What was he saying? Was this the end? Was he banishing me? He continued, his gaze unwavering. I could send you away. You're an assassin. I could give you resources, a new identity, a safe haven in a corner of the world where my enemies would never find you. A life of freedom far from this chaos. It would be my payment for saving my life. A final, generous severance. The offer hung in the air, tempting, terrifying. A life of freedom. No more masks, no more missions, no more looking over my shoulder. Everything I had ever ostensibly wanted. But the thought of it, of leaving this man, of stepping away from the dangerous current that now flowed between us, sent a chill through me. It felt like a death sentence of a different kind. Or, he said, his voice dropping, you could stay. His eyes searched mine, their depth fathomless. Not as my pet Isla, not as my prisoner, but as my partner, mi consigliere, the woman who sees the cracks, who anticipates the betrayals, who fights by my side. You would be a queen in this kingdom, but you would also be a warrior. My heart soared, then plummeted. A partner, a queen, but also a warrior. It was everything I secretly craved, a life of purpose, of challenge, of undeniable power, with a man who saw my true strength. But it came with an impossible cost. My freedom, my independence, wrapped in his possessive claim. My mind raced, weighing the options. Freedom, a quiet, solitary existence. Or this. This dangerous, exhilarating, utterly consuming vortex of power and passion, with a man who both terrified and fascinated me. Everything in me screamed that this was madness, that I should take the escape, run as far and as fast as possible. But a traitorous part of me, the part that craved the challenge, the part that recognized a kindred spirit, whispered a fierce, undeniable yes. I met his gaze, my chin rising in a gesture of defiance, of acceptance. You call your home a sanctuary, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I saw its flaws tonight. I showed you its weaknesses. I fought for its protection. And for yours. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, understanding dawning. You need a partner, I continued, my voice growing stronger, imbued with a newfound authority. Not a pet. Someone who sees the unseen, who anticipates the strike. Someone who will challenge you, push you, and stand with you against the world. I reached out, my bloodied hand, still bearing the mark of my fight, coming to rest against his jaw, my thumb stroking his rough stubble. You think you bought me, Don Nico, but you merely found a mirror for your own savage heart. His breath hitched. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them, their depths molten steel, burning with a fierce, possessive triumph. And what does your savage heart choose, little blade? He whispered, his voice thick with raw emotion. I leaned in, my lips brushing his, my gaze locking with his. I choose to stay, I declared, the words a powerful, active claim. And I choose you. But understand this, I am not yours to own. I am yours to fight alongside, to conquer with, and to challenge, always. My voice dropped to a low, intimate murmur, my eyes holding his. And if you truly believe I am a blade, Don Nico, then know this. I am a blade that cuts both ways. And you will be the first to bleed. Should you ever underestimate me again? His lips curved into that dangerous, utterly captivating smile, a feral gleam in his eyes. He let out a low, satisfied growl. Then let us bleed together, Ela. He kissed me then, with an intensity that stripped away all doubt, all fear, all hesitation. It was a kiss of triumph, of acceptance, of two wild, untamed souls finally finding their brutal, beautiful home in each other. The silk sheets rustled beneath us as I arched into him, my body singing with a fierce, dangerous joy. The gilded cage had been shattered, remade not into a prison, but into a kingdom where two rulers, equally formidable, would reign. My mark was my keeper, yes, but I had tamed the beast, and in doing so I had claimed him as my own.